Welcome to Gartner ThinkCast. I'm Karen Stokes-Lockhart, and today we're kicking off a series of episodes on the topic that is dominating all industries and functions, the so-called Great Resignation. You don't need to hear the statistics to know what's going on. It's all around us. But I'm going to share a few anyway. In November 2021 alone, 4.5 million people voluntarily left their jobs. 52% of respondents to a recent Gartner survey said the pandemic actually made them question the purpose of their day-to-day job, and another 50% said it changed their expectations of their employer. We are at a unique and fraught moment. Before we move on, I encourage you to check out Gartner's complimentary Future of Work Resource Center. It's full of more data and analysis on the subject and linked in the show notes. Now, I'm excited to bring you a conversation between Chris Howard, Gartner's Chief of Research, and Michelle Bazargan, a Senior Director of Strategy and Innovation. In Chris's role, he's responsible for the development of integrated topics that cover all areas of our research, just like this one. Michelle focuses on inspiring and guiding leaders like you to reinvent your future business models through sustainable strategies that will keep you competitive in the long term. Chris, Michelle, take it away.
Hi, Chris. How are you today?
Hey, Michelle. Doing great. How are you?
Good. I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, it's important. This is really important stuff.
Chris, I know you're not a big fan of the term the Great Resignation, and I often hear you refer to our current state as the Great Reflection. Why is that?
Well, it's because I took some time off over the holidays. And I was thinking about, how tired I was and reflecting a little bit and thinking about researching what we're going to be doing in the next year. And, the Great Resignation has been in the popular lexicon now for several months. And I thought, well, is that really what it is? And the truth is it's happening, right? I mean, there are places where people are resigning, but I kept coming back in my mind to say it's actually something bigger going on. And the resignation stuff is a symptom of that. So what's really underneath it? And what I was thinking is we've gone through this human catastrophe together, unfortunately, but it's created this kind of collective sense of what's my purpose, what's my value, and how am I spending my time? And a chunk of that, of course, is at work. We spend a lot of time at work. And people have been honestly asking the question, is that bringing me the kind of value that I expect it to? And because my sense of value has changed. And I've said to some people that it's very much like collective human bargaining, in that people are actually using this as a point of leverage to say, I want something different in my life.
Yeah, and really taking a step back. And like you said, we spend so much of our time, majority of it, at work. And are we really fulfilled there?
Yeah. And it seems like a lot to ask an employer, right? And the truth is that, well, it's actually a fair question. The HR coverage that we do here at Gartner, we've talked about the new employment deal, which is a reckoning between employee and employer to say, how do I bring my whole self to work? Because there's a lot of advantage of that for me and for you as the employer. So it's a real conversation that we see happening at our clients.
Do you feel like everyone's going through this, or is this for those that are in positions of privilege?
Well, I think everybody's tired, right? And it's true around the world. And as we think we're coming out of a variant, another one comes up. And as we're speaking today, it seems like, at least in the United States, the Omicron surge seems to be coming down. But people are still in this brace for impact position, regardless of who they are or where they are or what they're doing. But I think a lot of the conversation around the Great Resignation specifically, and the nature of hybrid work and so on, the changing nature of work, has focused a lot on knowledge worker, which is a term I don't like, but let me use it for a minute. So in other words, people that sit in front of screens all day and make abstract decisions, those kinds of people. But the truth is that the folks on the front line, kind of at the coal face of the pandemic, are making and moving things. They're interacting with people. They're nurses. They are teachers. They're people that have really experienced the pandemic in a very real way. And we need to start paying some attention to them as well, which is, I think, an enormous opportunity for employers as well as for Gartner and the research we're planning to do.
Yeah, and I'm seeing a lot more beyond the HR recruitment topic as well. And I've been thinking about this for a long time, probably started during the holidays, and the buzzwords on the war on talent and all that good stuff. And when you take a step back to your point and look at the human collective, 80% of what we do is subconscious, meaning we don't even know that we're doing it. We're on autopilot. And we've picked those up from society, schools, companies where we've worked at. And so we've all been programmed to fit in and do the right thing. And now I think we're all pausing going, wait a minute, I followed the rules. I did what I was supposed to. And I'm in this crossroads where I don't feel fulfilled and happy. And so I think everyone is taking a step back and really thinking about the old definitions. And people are unhappy. They're burnt out. The reality is depression rates are through the roof. Caretakers, women are atrophying. So there's a lot more happening than I think meets the eye that we kind of put on HR or recruitment.
Yeah, I agree with that. I was having a conversation earlier today with one of my other chiefs of research, and we were talking about the purpose of the firm is to bring people together in the pursuit of something greater than any one of them, right? So you're bringing together people in a common purpose. And what I sense happening is that common purpose is more of a humanist purpose now, in addition to all the commercial purposes and public function purposes and so on. That stuff is all true, but it's not enough. And so, as part of pulling people together into the firm has to be human centered in its design in order to fulfill this need, which has emerged from the pandemic itself. So, I agree, bigger than an HR thing, it's really a human thing.
Yeah, definitely. And given that space of being more authentic, and as you mentioned, bringing your real self to work, and how does that fit in with the firm, so to speak? I mean, I'll speak even uniquely to myself. My family and I escaped a war and immigrated here to the US. And to technically fit in, we literally changed our names. We went to school to get rid of our accents and didn't feel like you could show up being different, looking different, speaking different. My example is an extreme one, but I think to a degree, everybody has done that to themselves, morphed themselves to fit in to the corporate environment. And now we're going, wait a minute, we say bring your whole self to work, but what does that mean? What part of myself can I bring?
I didn't know that part of your story, Michelle. That's fascinating and kind of tragic at the same time. But I know exactly what you mean. And I think there's a reversal happening here in that bringing the whole self to work. Well, what does that mean? Or having a DE&I initiative set up and making it more than just words. The truth is that you, specifically, Michelle, will come into a situation with a different set of heuristics to solve problems because of the problems you've had to solve in your life. And that is why it's such a powerful thing to bring people with lots of different backgrounds and perspectives to solve the hardest problems that we face. And I wonder if actually the pandemic has been a blessing in disguise in that way, because everybody is remote. It makes it easier for people to bring their different abilities into that environment because a lot of the physical restrictions and other types of restrictions are broken down. And so as we move back into this blended remote work, we can't forget that, right? We need to actually bring that stuff with us as we go back to some kind of a new normal.
Yeah, and I love that point because that's really true diversity of thought that drives creativity and innovation. It's not about what you see on the surface level. So focused on this D&I topic on what's external. And it's really a shift of what's inside, to your point. My background's different, yours is different. How do we give everybody that opportunity that could potentially lead to creating the business of the future if we do it right? And so I think this whole shift, to your point, has really helped us come together, and organizations can hopefully keep this momentum going with the barriers we removed.
One thing's for sure, it is more important than ever to create a positive, purpose-driven culture on your team and in your organization. Linked in the show notes is Gartner's leadership vision for 2022. It breaks down 3 strategic actions for you to tackle so you can quickly and effectively diagnose your priorities and actions. There's no time like the present to humanize your employee value proposition and improve business outcomes. Find the actionable guide linked in our show notes and delve into creating a human-centered value proposition that treats employees as people, not workers.
Part of that momentum, and this goes to what you do your research in and write about and interact with, is leadership and culture and what has to change to maintain that momentum. What do you think? What are the types of things you're talking with clients about there?
One of the big things we cover is being a credible leader, as simple as making sure what you're saying and putting out there matches what you're doing day in, day out. And that's hard work, right? Because again, majority of what leaders, which are humans too, do is subconscious. So it's that careful balancing act of, even on our last topic, if you're going to put diversity and inclusion as one of your big missions, then you really have to work hard to make sure that that's going to cascade down. Really, same goes with the strategies, right? There's a lot of big changes that have obviously happened in the market and economic turns and such. And so there's these big strategic plans that leaders are putting out there, but they really also need to ensure that it's cascading down appropriately to the frontline workers. And I think what people are feeling is that there is a gap and that they don't have what they need and that their work is not even sustainable. So we talk a lot with leaders about how to really close that gap and think about what their directors and managers are doing, what their micro plans look like, and truly getting a better grasp of what each frontline worker is actually experiencing.
Yeah, and the truth is that there are some things that people do that maybe they shouldn't be doing, whether it's unhealthy environments or repetitive tasks or dealing with too much data to process, all of these types of things, where well designed technology should provide some kind of a cognitive offload for them or physical offload in some cases too, which enables them to then focus on the things that humans are really well designed to do, which is to build relationships and come at problems from a creative point of view, all of those kinds of things that give us a sense of value in the work that we're doing. If we're acting in this way and producing these kinds of results, it's a much more fulfilling kind of place to be. And leaders need to find out how to set that up.
To that point, studies have shown creativity makes people happier, and innovation is definitely part of this conversation. But at the same time, the leadership team has to truly make a commitment around it because our day to day operating models do not drive innovation. They were built in the Industrial Revolution, they're built for efficiency, they're not cut out for people to be creative. And so there needs to be a commitment to how are we going to do this operating model? How are we going to truly shift to a culture of innovation? And I think leaders need to give that some thought and investment.
Michelle, are we really in this situation all just because of the pandemic?
I think the pandemic definitely accelerated our thinking and our collective awareness. And it definitely made us make real everyday choices so quickly on how we spend our time, the shift to working at home. But I think that this has been brewing for a long time where people are stepping back and really thinking about what's important for them and what their future looks like. And we spend 90,000 hours at work over our lifetime. Like, that's serious. What do you think, Chris?
Yeah, I think the pandemic, as I said, just it broke all of our rituals apart. And to cast that into a work situation, it's like, okay, what did we have ritual around before that we actually really didn't need? Why did it take so long to make decisions about things? Or, am I really happy as a Taylorist object in the organization? All of those beliefs about what work was have been shaken to the core. And hopefully, as our designs go forward, we have that in mind.
Yes, definitely. I agree with that. And we don't have to wait for a pandemic to question things like, why don't we work remote? It might be more efficient. It might fit our needs. Asking those questions, I think, are more important. And I think the pandemic has accelerated for everyone, both organizations and individuals, to start asking the bigger questions.
The pandemic has made it okay to be vulnerable with one another, which can be uncomfortable, right? Or at least it was at first. But that's one of those things where we've just gotten better at being more human with one another. And we expect that to simply be part of interactions going forward.
Yes, I definitely hope that we continue collectively to make room for those vulnerable conversations where we speak to each other like we're humans, right? Not calendars and emails and messages. And probably remember that collectively, we're all so similar. We all go through the same challenges. We probably go through the same thought processes, questioning ourselves if we're doing the right thing. Did I show up well today?
There's no time like the present to humanize your employee value proposition and improve business outcomes. Find the actionable guide linked in our show notes and delve into creating a human-centered value proposition that treats employees as people, not workers.
I'm sure if we all shared what really goes on in our minds, we probably all have the same thoughts and feelings and emotions. So being able to talk about that, I hope we keep that in all the environments around the world.
Yeah, I agree. And preaching to the choir in that I feel ruled by my calendar so much of the time and don't really get a chance to do the creativities. That's a time management thing. But the other thing I've been thinking about too is that there are creative things that we do in the rest of our lives that are actually really germane to the material output of our work. So for me, for example, I'm a musician, right? So when I have the time to just do some brain cleaning, I'll go play some Bach or something like that, just to move away from the screen and get away from the tyranny of the calendar. And it's amazing how much that helps. And what I'm seeing enlightened employers doing is actually that's really important time for you as part of your job to have these creative outlets and to use them as fusion times or synthesis times for the complex things that you have to do. Do you see the same thing?
Yeah, definitely. Creating that environment, because to your point, the way our minds switch gears, you can't necessarily in 20 minutes be creative, right? You have to kind of get in the environment, be inspired. I think that time and that shift will really change things. And I see organizations that are doing this really well are committed and they dedicate the time and really enable the frontline workers to accomplish that.
Yeah. And one of the things that's happened, of course, in a more virtual environment is that we have filled our calendars with meetings even more. It's like working from home or working for some other location, you feel like responsible for filling your time. That has to change. Something that you've talked a little bit about that I want to just circle back on as we're coming to a close here is this idea of most of what we do is unconscious. What I'm witnessing now is really when you go through a crisis of some kind, those heuristics you carried into the situation don't work anymore. So all of a sudden, you're very conscious of everything. And there's a lot of that happening now, which is really healthy because that's how you find solutions. And one of the things that we're trying to do here with your work and the work of other analysts is to say, well, what are the emerging heuristics? What are the things that we're learning how to do in a different way in order to manage things differently and to behave differently for a different set of outcomes? So it's a super healthy time that we're going through, but a lot of the answers aren't clear yet. We're learning them as we go.
Yeah, I agree. It's funny. I saw a quote from Adam Grant the other day, and it kind of applies. He says, "We laugh at people who use Windows 95, but we cling on to opinions we formed in 1995." And I think on that topic, it's really an opportunity for leaders to drive a little bit more conscious leadership to say, this command and control environment we have, like, why don't we do things differently? Why don't we shift to a culture of we versus me, even doing business outside of the four walls of our organizations? The walls are coming down. So let's really rethink the way that we drive our business and really do business overall.
All of this goes to value. So creating a different type of value or what's an employee value proposition? And is it enough just to pay somebody more to keep them? I mean, clearly not, right? And it's really, do I feel respected, recognized in the job? Am I able to actually bring my full self for the fulfillment that that brings me and then that contributes to you? So there's this sort of reckoning with that. So maybe let's think about the rest of this year and beyond. One of the things that I expect to see is more attrition at higher executive levels. So at C levels, I'm seeing a fair amount of movement there now between corporations, but there's also a certain part of that population that probably, if they really thought about it hard, don't actually need to work anymore at all, or can take the financial risk to go and maybe do a startup or something like that. And so these people are burnt out too, and I expect to see them moving. You seeing the same kind of thing, Michelle?
Yeah, I definitely seen senior levels. Even my own mentor recently left a very great position, started to shift towards a startup, and definitely starting to see the playing field just changing where people are making changes that maybe they would have never done before. They wouldn't have left a comfortable position that was kind of guaranteed through retirement. And I think in general, that ripples down to probably every generation where there is a higher comfort with shifting and changing, especially with what's happening in the startup world, the venture capital funding for
Oh,
startups.
so much money in 2021.
Yeah. And so their climate related funding, their female run funding. And so enterprises are kind of forgetting that that could definitely become part of their competition, whether it's people leaving to go work for them or disrupting their own supply chains around that.
Yeah, and it just as a reminder as we close out here for people that most of us work in enterprises. Enterprises exist within society and they bear responsibility for good and bad outcomes. And investors are paying attention. So the promises that you make around social sustainability and other types of sustainability are actually going to material valuation of companies now. And so we are trying to shift from a mindset of doing less harm to doing way more good and having that actually be part of our value proposition to the world. And so we can't ignore it.
Yeah, definitely. And that co creation mindset, too, right? Which is a completely different way of doing business, whether it's sharing profits for the greater good. We sort of saw it with the pandemic, right? With when Pfizer and BioNTech teamed up to take innovation and have it meet scale. We don't have to wait for that type of situation to do those types of co-creations. It's just thinking differently for the greater good.
Yeah, and it sounds hyperbolic, but I really mean it. The collective power of enterprises and governments around the world, we actually have the ability to change things for the world, for good. And that's what I hope we learn coming out of this and what we're going to start to see in all of the research that we're doing. Michelle, this has been so much fun. Thank you for joining me on this conversation. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It's been awesome.
That was Chris Howard, Gartner's Chief of Research, and Michelle Bazargan, a Senior Director of Strategy and Innovation, in conversation about what we will now be very careful not to call the Great Resignation. We'll be back wherever you listen to podcasts 2 weeks from today with the next episode in this series. This one focusing specifically on the employee value proposition, especially for non-office and our frontline workers. In the meantime, please rate, review, subscribe, and share ThinkCast with a colleague so neither of you will miss it.
ThinkCast is a production of Gartner. This podcast may not be reproduced or distributed in any form without Gartner's permission. It consists of the opinions of Gartner's research organization, which should not be construed as statements of fact. Content provided by other speakers is expressly the views of the speaker and/or their organization. While the information contained in this podcast has been obtained from sources believed to be reliable, Gartner disclaims all warranties as to the accuracy, completeness, or adequacy of such information. Although Gartner research may address legal and financial issues, Gartner does not provide legal or investment advice, and its research should not be construed or used as such.